If you're a startup founder, you already know that payroll seems simple, right up until the moment it's not. So today, we're going to demystify this whole thing. We're breaking down the top payroll software players to help you figure out which one is the right strategic move for your company. And this, right here, this really just gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? I mean, you're out there trying to build an amazing product, find customers, maybe even raise capital. The absolute last thing you want to be doing is Googling state tax deadlines at midnight. And yet, for so many founders, that's exactly what happens. And believe me, the stakes for getting this wrong are incredibly high. Check out this number, $273 million. That's how much the Department of Labor recovered in back wages and damages in just 1 year from companies that messed up payroll. It is a massive and very expensive problem. But, okay, here's the good news. According to G2's analysis, just using modern payroll software makes a huge difference. We're talking about businesses seeing, on average, 31% fewer errors. Think about that. That's a massive reduction in risk and, let's be honest, in headaches. And it's not just about getting the numbers on a paycheck right. Nope, it's about compliance. That same analysis found that software users also run into a staggering 70% fewer compliance issues. This is all about staying on the right side of all those state and federal rules, which, as you're about to see, gets really complicated really fast. So, we've seen the big, scary numbers. But what does this pain actually look and feel like for a founder on the ground day to day? Well, let's dive into what we're calling the founder's payroll headache. This right here, this is the reality. It's the constant stress of trying to manage this super complex rule-based system all by yourself. And every tiny little mistake, it has a cost. The source material actually points out that the average cost to fix just one payroll error is $291. That adds up so fast and just pulls you away from what you should be doing, building your company. Okay, so before we jump into comparing all the different platforms, we have to talk about something crucial. We need to understand why a fast-growing startup has completely different needs than, say, a local restaurant or some giant corporation. Let's break down what makes you unique. These 4 points are pretty much everything. First, remote work is the new normal, right? So you're hiring across state lines, and suddenly they're navigating this maze of different tax laws. Second, you probably don't have an HR department. It's just you or maybe one ops person doing it all. Third, those compliance mistakes aren't just about money. They can completely derail your focus for weeks. And finally, that simple tool that worked great for your first 5 hires, it might just completely break when you hit 50. All right, now for the main event. We've defined the problem, we know the headaches, so let's get to the solutions. We're going to walk through the 5 key platforms that venture-backed founders, people just like you, are actually using right now. This table gives us a fantastic high-level view of the whole landscape. You can see each platform has a very specific pitch, from Gusto's pure simplicity all the way to Rippling's all-in-one system. But the real key here is matching their pitch to your startup's specific stage and your biggest challenge. So let's break down who each one of these is really for. Okay, first up is Gusto. For years, this has been the go-to, and for good reason. Its interface is incredibly easy to use. If your main challenge is just getting started, and most of your employees are in one state, Gusto is a perfect, simple starter. So what's the trade-off? Well, as soon as you start hiring across the country, you're going to need a pricier plan. And even then, some of the most critical state tax registrations still have to be done by hand. So if Gusto's big trade-off is that multi-state complexity, well, that is the exact problem that Warp was built to solve. It's part of this new wave of AI-native platforms. Founders call it the Stripe for payroll, which basically means compliance just works. It happens in the background. If your biggest headache is automating all those registrations and filings for a distributed team, Warp is your AI co-pilot. It was built by founders for founders. Now, what if your hiring map isn't just multi-state, but it's multinational? That's exactly where Deel comes in. It lets you hire in over 150 countries because it acts as what's called an employer of record, which means it handles all the local labor laws, all the payments, all that complexity. So if your number one challenge is global expansion, Deel is essential. The trade-off is pretty obvious. If you're only hiring in the US, it's a very expensive solution for a problem you just don't have. So while Deel solves for where you hire, Justworks solves for how you compete for talent. It's a PEO, or a professional employer organization. Basically, it pools all the employees from lots of different startups together so it can get everyone access to big enterprise-level benefits. If your main challenge is recruiting top-tier talent against the big guys, this is your power-up. The catch? Well, that co-employment model comes with higher per-employee costs and, yeah, a little less flexibility. And finally, we've got Rippling. And you need to think of Rippling less as just a payroll tool and more like your company's entire operating system. It pulls together HR, IT, and finance. It handles everything from payroll to literally shipping a new laptop to an employee. So if your challenge has grown way beyond just payroll and is now about managing the entire employee lifecycle, Rippling is the answer. But it's a beast. It's powerful, it's complex, and it's often total overkill for early-stage companies. Plus, it can take weeks to get it set up. Okay, so we've looked at all the key players, but seeing all this automation often brings up a really fundamental and totally valid fear for founders. And that brings us to our last section, the automation question. And there it is. Paying your team correctly and on time, that's one of your most sacred duties as a founder, right? So the question is it really safe to hand that all over to software? Well, the data kind of flips that question on its head. According to a big study by Ernst & Young, this number, 29, that's the number of work weeks per year that human payroll professionals spend just fixing common payroll errors. 29 weeks. That's over half a year of just putting out fires. So here's the crucial point. The real risk isn't the software. The real risk is human error. These modern platforms automate all the rule-based, calculation-heavy stuff where software is amazing, and where humans, especially super busy founders, are likely to make mistakes. This is especially true when you're dealing with taxes in multiple states. And that really brings us to the core takeaway here. The goal isn't just to pick any software. It's to choose a strategic partner for your company's infrastructure. So we want to leave you with this final, critical question to ask yourself. Which of these platforms not only solves my problems today, but gives me room to grow tomorrow?